Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Nishant, and welcome to another episode of the Nishant Garg Show. The mission of the show is to spread awareness on mindfulness practices, psychology, mental health, and spirituality. My job on the show is to invite world class performers to share the practices to live a fulfilled life. And today's guest is Elizabeth Ross. Elizabeth is a natural entrepreneur, connector, and systems change architect. People often say that she brings a calm and joy to the room. Elizabeth is a true explorer and loves to find solutions that improve human experience. From a very young age, she had to branch out on her own because of family circumstances. That path has created who she is today and is what fuels her passion for life. She is a singer, songwriter, and a charity auctioneer. She has helped raise over more than $1 million for her favorite charities in the past 20 years, including Riding to the Top Therapeutic, Riding Center, Big Brothers Big Sisters, Ronald McDonald House, Outward Bound, One Longfellow Square, Portland Ovations, and Girl Scouts. Outside of work, Elizabeth finds balance through family, community, meditating in the woods, cooking, singing, mountain biking, and quarry swimming along the coast of Maine. And now, let the episode begin. Elizabeth, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much, Nishant. It's great and wonderful to be here.
My pleasure. I would love to start off with something funny over here. If you're in a social gathering and somebody walks up to you and asks, what do you do for a living? How do you answer?
Find as much joy in every day that I can. My answer isn't typically to jump into work. I used to jump right into my work conversation. And now I try to think more about the bigger picture of life. And so typically I'll bounce a question back.
What does that bigger picture look like for you now?
The bigger picture is working on being more present to my day and to how I'm serving in my community and my family, with my clients. It's trying to not push, but to serve. I mean, don't get me wrong. I have a business plan and an outline of things that we offer. I would say that today I really try to learn more about what is needed and try to fill those needs where my skills allow me to.
Can you please elaborate more on your business side for our listeners, what you do, and
Sure.
go from there?
Yes, I have a company called Mindful Employer, and we are working at the intersection, I would say, of mindfulness as a really important practice and way of being and working and leading, combined with a business structure that I follow through conscious capitalism. Have you heard of conscious capitalism before?
No, never. What is that?
So, conscious capitalism is a focus on with the belief of that most all of us are looking and are most satisfied when doing purposeful work. And it actually originated with Raj Sisodia and a group of folks that wrote a book that I was exposed to a few years ago called Firms of Endearment. And they wrote and talked about conscious capitalism, and they talk about these 4 basic tenets in terms of building a company. It's higher purpose, stakeholder integration, so a new way of not just thinking about profits as your end goal, thinking about how you can be part of an ecosystem where everyone that comes in contact with that your lives are all improved. And by that, I mean your customers, your employees, your communities, the culture, your suppliers. That's a big one. That's where the stakeholder integration comes in. And so it's a new way, or a sort of probably a back to the future way. I know my dad's business operated like this in the 50s and 60s. And it's a way of making sure that we are putting human beings first and aligning with nature in terms of how we are going about our work. So the other two tenets are conscious culture and conscious leadership, which are, the ways that we work together as we're accomplishing our business goals.
And then where does mindfulness fit into conscious leadership and conscious capitalism?
Mindfulness to me is a practice, is a way of being curious, of being aware of where you are in a given moment, and being more observational and not judgmental. So really listening, being curious is probably my favorite word, is you're approaching things with a curiosity and a desire to help and to serve. And for me, mindfulness allows me, is a practice. So if I think of meditation as the grounding practice of mindfulness, meditation is something that you can bring to your day. It doesn't have to just be when there's a term, butts on the cushion when you're sitting to practice meditation. And I think of mindfulness in terms of business as a way of bringing the practice throughout your day to pay more attention to how you are responding to your day versus reacting to your day. And so that's why to me, it's a critical foundational competency to emotional intelligence, which is what we know today to be even more important than IQ.
It is. And having mindfulness practices in our personal life can be easier than having this practice into our business and workplace. And how do you teach people to incorporate mindfulness into their work life?
Well, I want to be clear that I'm not a trained mindfulness teacher. The way I came to mindfulness at work was when I was really a train wreck. I was not mindful. I was working my way up the corporate ladder. I was ironically head of health and well-being for a large national or global bank. And I was a workaholic. I lost several family members in a very short amount of time due to cancer. And my approach to working through that pain was to just work harder. And then I had my own health scare. And it was our CEO actually who introduced me to mindfulness and introduced me, as you said, first in my personal practice. And then I began doing research about, how could we, and his question was, how can we introduce this to our employees? And it turns out that launched another year of work research for me, looking at how do we work this was particularly in the US, but it applies globally. And the way we work has really changed significantly in the last 100 years. And I would say exponentially in the last 2 decades with the growth of technological advancements. And so the reason I bring that into this conversation now is that there used to be space in our workdays, natural spaces. Once we were into the mid 1920s, Ford was probably the first to adopt in a large way the 40-hour work week, the 8-hour day. And in that, we also had breaks. So people would take morning breaks. You would have a lunch break, an afternoon break. And by a lot, people would leave at the end of 8 hours and then have personal time after that. What's happened is, as you know, those lines as we got into the mid to, 2005, 2010, those lines are really blurred now. Very few people work a straight 8-hour day and have breaks. And so what I've done in the practices that we teach through Mindful Employer is to help businesses look at that workday, help teams and help leaders and individuals look at their workday and start by just adding 2, 3, 5-minute pauses into their day to just disconnect from their phones if they can, from their computer screens. And we start with just breathing. Just turn your head away from your computer screen and take a few deep breaths, or take a walk around the office. We have hundreds of practices that we can recommend based on the work environment. And that's how I'm slowly bringing mindfulness into the workday, is by reintroducing it as a way of pausing to manage stress and to enhance our well-being.
And pausing and slowing down can increase our creativity at work and overall happiness at work, and increasing our performance, optimal performance at work when we take pauses.
Absolutely.
You mentioned that taking breathing in those pauses. What else can we do during those pauses?
Let's see. So we try to focus on, the different kind of work situations. So let's say a call center, because call centers are a really stressful place to be, right? So oftentimes they'll just have 1 minute. So in 1 minute, in addition to breathing, you can turn and just gaze out the window, if you're near a window, and allow yourself to just take 60 seconds to look at something other than your screen. You can use it to stretch. You can get up, and there's a quick stretch sequence that runs anywhere from 1 to 3 minutes. You can just stand and shut your eyes for 60 seconds. What's amazing to me is when we do our workshops with people, I'll lead them in 1 minute of silence and ask people to raise their hands, how many times they've done that in the last week, taken 1 minute of silence for themselves. And it's really alarming that, less than 10%, less than 20% of the people will raise their hands that they had a minute to themselves. It's getting better. I'd say we're probably up to 20-25% of people now, but 75% of people are not taking a minute to stop consciously.
And this is something, we do it unconsciously, but consciously it requires some practices, some reminders initially. Yes. So do you provide some template to the employees to track their progress?
We actually recommend different, different apps that they can use. So I'm a big believer in Insight Timer. I use Insight Timer a lot. We use 10% Happier. Will, WHIL, is a program that you can, as a employer, can purchase and actually get reporting on your usage. Headspace is the same thing. So we work on, if somebody wants to, that to me kind of ties you back to your phone. So I'm not an enormous fan of that, but it is practical. I also do something as old-fashioned as a timer, putting a timer on your desk, and just every 45 minutes, making sure you're getting up and moving. Because coming from a long background in employee well-being, sitting is the new smoking. So we really need people to get up and move. So it's an opportunity to do both at once, to take that pause and to move. So we use those kinds of tools as reminders, or we talk about where can you find space in your day, right? If you look at your calendar, and not just your work calendar, but from the minute you wake up, a beautiful thing that you can do when you first wake up in the morning, no one knows that your eyes have fluttered open yet or not, right? So before you actually get out of bed, spend 2-3 minutes and just arrive at the morning, right? You can do that when you arrive at your desk. There was a great video that Scott Shute from LinkedIn he showed himself arriving at his desk, and he just held his hands on the back of his chair before he sat down and spent a minute just arriving there, right? Before he got started. So we try to help people look at where the natural pauses are in their day to then input a minute or 2 or 5 or 10 just being.
It's about structuring our work day.
Yes.
So that we don't just go with the flow. And We were talking about using cell phone to use these apps. I think we can, again, in those silent moments, if we are with our phones, we may defeat the purpose. I'm not saying that this is incorrect way. We can use some paper to track our progress, maybe from Monday to Friday. Track if we did it, check mark. If we didn't do it, cross.
Oh, I like that idea. Right. Just put a simple little calendar up and check off if each time during the day.
Because getting away from the phone for even a minute can be a very useful thing. Because if I'm on the phone, I would be checking my social media or something like that. So that allows me to get away from the phone. It's a pause. It's a sacred moment for me to get disconnected from the outside world just for a few minutes.
And do you practice?
I do it every day. It's been 2.5 years. I do it all the time, and at work I have this block time strategy. So I would block time from 50. I started with 30 minutes, then 50, 60, 90 minutes. Not beyond 90 minutes. When I have a block time, I would not allow myself to go here and there. Every day is a different day, but if I'm focused on one thing for about 90 minutes can be a big chunk for somebody who has never done it.
Yes.
So you can start with 30 minutes, 20 minutes, focusing on one thing at a time. It requires a lot of attention and focus. And when we do, after that, I stop what I'm doing and then I would take walks around, maybe 5, 10, 15 minutes of walks. Everybody's schedule is different. I have this flexibility to take 10, 15 minutes of breaks where I would just walk, long walks and breathing, allowing myself to come back to my body. So that's what I do, and thinking about what happened, what did I do in the last 2 hours, what I'm going to be doing in the next 2 hours, intention setting. There's so many practices.
Yes, but I love that. One of the things that we've been kind of sold a bill of goods on in terms of U.S. working or just working with technology is that we are able to multitask, right? And that is a complete myth.
Yes.
Our human brains, we can physically do two things at once. I can brush my teeth and put on my pair of pants, so you can do something like that. It is not possible for your brains. There have been many studies on this to actually do two things at once. It takes you 15 to 20 minutes if you're working on a project and you get sucked away by your phone to get back into that project. And so the estimates are that if you are multitasking and working a 10-hour day, you can single task and be working an 8-hour day. It's that powerful to do what you just described. It's hard.
It's hard, and it's in companies where it's fruitful as well. And in companies, we have distractions all over the place. People are talking, people are on the phone, so it gets difficult. And that's when our real mindfulness comes into place. I used to be very distracted when there was a noise and all around. Then I started thinking how these sports persons manage their focus in this noisy environment in a stadium.
Yes.
Then I tried to put some music in my ears. I'm not a fan of it, but to be more focused, making my emotional muscle is strong to focus in a noisy environment. I can do amazing when there is silence, but being able to focus in a noisy environment.
And that's so many people as workplaces have moved to no walls and to people working collaboratively and in groups. And some of that is great for certain roles. For others, it's almost impossible for them to work. And so music and having headphones. And one of the things that I've read is that if you put music on that, it doesn't have words can be helpful, right? Like if you put on instrumental music or Headspace has a lot of sounds, or not Headspace, but Insight Timer has a lot of soundscapes. And so you can just put that into your ears and then you're not thinking about lyrics. Cause I'm a singer. And so the second I start hearing lyrics, I want to start singing the lyrics. And so that's not that helpful. But I found that when you put the, instrumental music on, like the cello or listening to just waves, that can be really helpful for concentration.
And let me ask you this. How do you incorporate mindfulness into your daily routine? It could be in your personal and professional life.
I'll tell you right now where we are in lockdown in this day in 2020, that I'm so grateful for having a mindfulness practice. I am using it in the morning to set my intentions for the day, to be open and to try and be patient and loving and kind to people. I just try to start my day off like that, like, who am I supposed to serve today, with a question. And then with clients, we're actually offering a couple of things that just came out as requests. Like, I didn't think about this. It's just something that someone reached out for. I am going into team meetings, and I'll join at toward the end of the meeting or in the middle, and lead people in a 10-minute meditation. Just a 10-minute pause, a guided pause, and then maybe do an uplifting reading.
At a workplace.
At a workplace. And these are virtual meetings right now because nobody's at the workplace. And then I bounce out. And so that's a way that I'm also doing it, because I'm leading it, which is nice. And then I am trying to be more aware of that I am home, and that this is something that I just looked at in my own behavior last week, Nishant, is that I realized that I am not as busy as I was before this virus hit, right? In some ways, I might be a little bit more busy, and there are bigger blocks in my day from not commuting, just a number of things.
Is it good or is it bad?
Well, what I'm finding is that I try to make myself be busy, right? So I have a space in the day, and instead of like maybe walking out into my backyard and watching the birds for a little while, or going for a walk in my neighborhood, or just allowing myself to sit and maybe pick up a book. And, it's things that I wouldn't normally do in the middle of a business day. I'm finding that it's okay. Our souls right now, in my sense, are being called to stillness. We're being called to look at how we are behaving in our work and in our lives. And I think that this is a really once in a, millennia opportunity to really find some space to reflect and to be with ourselves.
And I was listening to Arianna Huffington. She was talking about distinction between work-life balance and work-life integration. So she was saying there is no work-life balance doesn't work. So we get to integrate work-life. So integration of wellness. So in this coronavirus pandemic these days, so if you have time, you can just go out for a walk for maybe 15, 20 minutes or whatever happens to be. So integration of all these wellness and well-being mindfulness practices into your work life.
Yes.
These days, my walking time is more than 2 hours. I take 2 to 3 sets, long walks into my work days. Then I try to make sure that my work is not impacted. And trying to integrate the whole life. It's not work is different and my personal life is separate. It's all integration. How can I integrate that? And my walking time is more than 2 hours these days.
Same here. I have been out every time I get before I would be like, where's an hour that I can walk? I don't have to wait for an hour. If a call ends early, I go out for a walk. I've been putting in more steps. It's wonderful. I don't feel like I've been this healthy in a really long time because of the integration. I love that word.
And this is stillness. And one of the practice that we can include while taking walks is not having any music in the phone. We sometimes try to multitask. We think, okay, let me listen to this music or let me listen to the podcast.
Yes.
Sometimes it is okay. There is nothing wrong. And I think if we allow ourselves to go for a walk or running without having any music or anything in the ears that allows us to be still and being in that present moment, and it allows us to be with the nature.
I completely agree. Where nature is waiting for us, right? Being in nature and just listening, especially, we're so fortunate in one way that this is spring. The whole world is waking up right now in the Northeast where I am. And it's so wonderful that it's April and not January with this happening, right? So we can go out and hear the birds and witness the flowers, unfolding and the leaves budding on the trees. And it just feels hopeful.
Exactly. And coming back to your intention setting practice that you do in the morning, so
yes.
you ask yourself, who are you going to serve today? So do you have that in your mind, or do you write it in your journal or something like that?
I mostly do it in my mind. However, in my journal is I try to, as I go to sleep, put 2 or 3 things on a pad that I might be struggling with or wanting an answer to or working on. And I find that when I wake up in the morning, there's usually some movement on that. So we know that when our brains are constantly on, that we don't have time to process. So what you talked about, in terms of needing space to think, if we don't allow ourselves to have space between our data processing center, which is our prefrontal cortex, and then the amygdala, where we can actually bring our experience to the information that's coming in. If we're not creating space for that to happen, then often we struggle with things. And so the 2 things that I really try to offer, not to hold on to, is feeling like I have control over finding a solution, because I've learned in practicing this for the past 3 or 4 years that if I just write it down, that it will come. It will come from my experience, maybe bringing a solution, or it'll come from a new observation when I provide that space. So I'm really kind of waking up to whatever I wrote down the next day. And then in my kind of just mantra or my talk during my own stillness in the morning, I then offer up how can I best serve today? Which feels so much better to me as I've gotten used to it than the way that I used to try to do it, is like, what am I going to control today? Right? What am I going to set out to do today? It feels a heck of a lot more natural.
It's a shift of mindset.
Yes, it's an absolute shift of mindset.
And I would like to ask you, if we do not have these mindfulness practices or some sort of wellness in our daily lives, what can happen to humans?
In my experience, and I'll quote Jon Kabat-Zinn, it leads to dis-ease, to disease. And I witnessed it I was head of health and well-being, as I said. And then before that, I was involved in health insurance and partnerships for 20 years with large companies. And if you look at the health data, the top 5 expenditures are negatively impacted by heightened stress. So things like cardiovascular disease and cancer and obesity, these top diagnoses that we're seeing day in and day out in our claims data. If you're a company looking at your health expenditures, they're all negatively impacted by stress. Yet so much of the money in our system goes to basically reacting to the situation that we've already created, rather than root cause, which is how I got involved in this work. Root cause is how 2 things that I've witnessed in my observations and my studies. 1, how we as individuals react to that stress that's coming at us. And then 2, companies and corporations, where is our centeredness and where is our heart of an organization in the environments we create? In my mind, if there's any company out there that isn't focused on improving the human experience, then why are we in business, right? Why would anybody want to work for a company that wasn't trying to improve the human experience? Because if we keep going on this trajectory, to answer your question, if we're not practicing being more aware of what we're doing, then we're going to stay on the wheel. We're going to continue reacting to things that are caused rather than restructuring how business can operate. And luckily we've got 25 years of data now, that research that's been done that show that when we do put humans first, all of the outcomes are better, which is exciting to me. I kind of went off track there on you, and I apologize, but it kind of links together.
This is very powerful. And in organizations, I think this is my opinion that leaders can think people are getting paid for 9 to 5 job for something like 8 hours. And if we incorporate these mindfulness practices, then work may not be getting done. But the irony is, when we have all these practices, when we pause for a while, then it cultivates more productivity. When we get back to our task, we can think creatively. From my personal life, whenever I struggle in juggling through a solution, I just leave. It's tough to leave something when you're in the middle, and when you leave, you allow it. It takes courage and self-acceptance that it's okay to not being able to coming up with any solution. You just leave the work for maybe 5 minutes, and when you come back, it's a rejuvenation. And there is this amazing book called The Power of Full Engagement. It's called Intense Recover. In the gym, in a physical gym, we train our muscles, we train our physical muscles, and then we take break. Why we take break, right? Because we are allowing our physical muscles to recover. If we don't take breaks, our muscles won't grow, but we don't do it with our emotional and mental muscles.
Exactly.
And in the world of physical fitness, people are very patient. They eat very good, They believe in the process, but when it comes to mindfulness and wellness, people are impatient.
It's so true. And it's just counterintuitive to our beings, right? A friend of mine, Kevin Hancock, just wrote a book called The Seventh Power. And he talks about aligning with nature, that he, as a CEO of a 6th-generation family business, it's a lumber company. They have 600 employees. He lost his voice. And what he learned was, when he came in and began to listen more and not have the solutions, right? Push the power out, that his people, he tells this beautiful story of the people have the solutions when you give them, to your point, the space and the power and empower them to think. And that was what he was able to do. And he's written, like I said, a beautiful book about it. And he came to these words, that 5 words: in nature, power is dispersed. And if you also think about nature as, in nature, there is space, right? There is space to be. And I think those two things, bringing those observations and practices into work and allowing people to have that space, you look at the numbers and they don't lie. There's a reason that these companies are more successful when they do that, when they allow their people space to have these practices. And so much so that the Business Roundtable, which is the powerful group of CEOs based out of New York, issued in August of 2019 a redefinition of the purpose of a corporation. And it is to now to promote an economy that serves all, right? Serves all Americans, it says, but it goes beyond that. And to me, what it's showing is that no one wants to be the one, Nishant. If the companies that are allowing their people space to think are outperforming the S&P 16-1, nobody wants to be the one, right?
Right.
And so that is, to me, really, really powerful to show that when we are paying attention to the needs of humans, that it matters, that it brings better financial results as well as better health results.
I think people knows about it. It's just the awareness is missing at a bigger level. So if, organizations and even in personal lives, if we can cultivate awareness that we are reacting to the situations and not getting to the root cause. Because the
Yes.
stress is going to be there. Stress will come, problems will come, and mindfulness and wellness practices will not resolve it right away. We can just
Right.
manage our stress
Yes.
in a better way, and we can, instead of reacting, we can think about it. Okay, what can we do this time so that we handle it in a better way when it comes in the future? Expanding our thinking.
Absolutely. And I think another big piece of this is who are the people leading our people, right? And the reason I say that is that creating this kind of culture that allows for people to have this space and then also to try things, right? To think and to try things requires a type of leadership that is compassionate and that is exceeding in emotional intelligence, as we mentioned earlier. And I believe that another big piece of embedding mindfulness into our organizations is making sure that we are promoting and investing training in servant leadership, in leaders who are there to help lift others up instead of the leaders that are, purely trying to reach a number goal or, because I knew in my work with these large publicly traded companies, I knew leaders who really cared, from the heart for the people that they were leading. However, they were being pushed from the top to do things that were unrealistic. Like you've heard the term do more with less.
Yes.
Have you heard of that term?
All the time.
Exactly. And that is unproven and unrealistic. It is unproven and unrealistic and unsustainable to continually do more with less. It's not, I don't know where the term even came from. I think because we were trying to label our inhumane practices and that we were dictating from the C-suite, but it's not a recipe for anything other than disease, burning people out, people making mistakes, all those things that we desperately don't want in our organizations and can't afford. We have to go back. There's a new book out by Dan Heath, if you've heard of him. It's called, The new one is called Upstream. And we have to go upstream, everyone. I would just say that we have to look at how we are structured. And I believe that we're in this beautiful time right now that nothing is going to look like it looked before when we come through this.
And the cause of burnout is, and the definition says burnout. You're burned out, so there is no energy left in your body. And if we don't recover, we keep expending our energy and we are not recovering from that. And we are burned out at the end.
Absolutely. We only have so much capacity, right? Without refueling. We have to, and it's up to each of us as individuals, you and I, it's up to each of us to also take that stand for ourselves. That, like you said, it is really hard to stop, to say, okay, I've worked enough on this. Now I need to give pause because I know if I do that and I come back, it will be a better situation. And until you try it a few times and begin to build trust that it's true, it's hard. And I will say that if you're willing to try it, just like Nishant, what you said is, if you're willing to try, you will see that it's better.
You have mentioned some of the great resources and books in our conversation. Does any other resource come to your mind where our listeners can go and look into that to really incorporate these things?
Yes, I would say, so first of all, you can buy the book, Conscious Capitalism, written by Raj Sisodia and John Mackey, the CEO of Whole Foods. There's consciouscapitalism.org. And if you go to their website, there are all kinds of programming that they offer. And it's just a beautiful resource. And that's on the conscious capitalism side. On the mindfulness side, there's so many teachers. I love John Kabat-Zinn. I've been lucky enough to do a retreat with him this past year. Thich Nhat Hanh writes some beautiful books, How to Sit, How to Love. So if you go out and just Google mindfulness, you'll see a lot come to the top. 10% happier. That's a really wonderful one for business folks who might not be, who are like mindfulness for skeptics, I like to say. Dan, I'm spacing on his last name right now, but the founder of 10% Happier he was a skeptic. And it's really fun to listen to him. He has a lot of information out there they have a podcast and an app, 10% Happier. So that's a fun place to go. So in terms of conscious capitalism and mindfulness, there's a lot of information. What I find is it really helps to find your voice in that. Like, listen to the different people that are out there and decide for yourself who you align with, because you're going to best learn with the voice that resonates for you.
Exactly. And all these practices are very traditional. They are ancient and they are not saying anything new. It's all same, but everybody is speaking in a different way. And we are doing the same thing. We are not devising any new thing here. We are just speaking in different ways from our different experiences. And coming back to the conscious capitalism, and so what is this book about, if you can give some nuggets from this book?
Well, it's filled with examples of companies who have changed the way they are. It talks about the Whole Foods journey, many of their journey. It actually goes into depth about, how do you look at your organization and what are the things that you can focus on first as a company. It's actually where Mindful Employer, the work that we're doing, we have a simple employee pulse check. To me, the most important thing is to be listening to our employees. So we help you hear the voice of your employees through a simple 8-question pulse check. And back to the tenets of conscious capitalism, the first is higher purpose. So the book talks about, how do you focus on your purpose beyond profits, right? What are you doing as an organization that pulls at the heartstrings? How are you serving? Because no matter who your customers are, the reason they're buying from you is because you're serving a need. And so the book talks about how you can tap in to going back to that core, or maybe for the first time, articulating that for yourselves as leaders and owners, and begin to bring your people along. Because there was just a study from Gallup and Bates College released in 2019 that 80% of college grads are looking for purposeful work. So purpose to me is number one. Stakeholder integration is a close second. And that's what I talked about earlier. It talks about, how do you think about your interactions, think about making decisions encompass all of your stakeholders,
and
your customers.
Speaking of decisions, and this is very important.
Yes.
In here, Tony Robbins talk about the quality of our life depend on the quality of decisions we take.
Yes.
And indecision is not taking any decision. And how do we make effective decision? The thing is stillness. When we are still, when we are meditating, when we are having mindfulness practices, then we we think. There is no right or wrong way.
Yes.
To decide what you want, and it's a momentary, we think about it, we think about all the pros and cons, we think about different options, what are the options available before we decide anything. And coming back to the conscious capitalism, I'm very super interested to learn more about this after this conversation. How are you associated with conscious capitalism book and with the board of directors? Do you have any association with that?
I am not part of their board of directors. I'm a co-chair for a chapter here in Portland, Maine, that is just beginning to evolve. The founder is my cohort, Tara Jenkins. And the reason that, just back to those decision making, because that was a really beautiful point that I don't want to overlook what you just said. Making decisions when you're in touch with your higher purpose and your values. And that's so key when you're sitting around and making decisions. If you have in writing that everyone that you come in contact with matters, when you're making hard decisions, those decisions become easier. And that's why I think it was just really important to highlight what you said there, that that is really important. And conscious leadership and culture means that you're making sure that when you're hiring people and bringing people into the fold, into what you're doing, you're hiring people that care about other people, that are aligned with your mission. And your culture is one that is lived. It is in the DNA of your organization, and not one that's just on a piece of paper somewhere, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm going to borrow some ideas from Simon Sinek.
Yes.
That he talks about
your why.
Your why, and he talks about that when a person is not performing well in a team or in a company, our default instinct is to blame and ask them why it is not happening, instead of asking them what is going on in your life. Because life integration. So maybe somebody is having tough time in their personal life, and that could be the reason of not performing well at the workplace. And again, coming back to the purpose and mission, it keeps evolving, I think. What do you think about it? I think it keeps evolving all the time.
I hope so.
And the meaning keeps changing. What we have loved in the past, it doesn't mean that we are going to love it forever. And for all the college grads, instead of finding the meaning and purpose, that can be very daunting. It was very daunting to me. It keeps changing to finding love. You got to try new things. Unless you try new things, you won't know what you are passionate about.
Absolutely. It is finding love. Like, we all want to be, we're going to stay with organizations that care about us. That's really the bottom line. You're going to stay as a business partner with someone who cares about you. This is all about exactly what you said. It's about bringing love and compassion into everything we do, not just our families and those that we love in our communities, to our work. Like, I remember working with a customer last year, Nishant, who said that I couldn't say the word soul in a meeting, in a presentation I was about to give. Oh no, you can't say soul and you can't say love. I'm like, what? We can't say soul at work? Why?
I have been told not to use the word spiritual.
Right. And we are all spiritual beings, And so I believe that, and I think you share this with me, that we are all on this spiritual journey. And that's why it's absolutely an evolution. So I'm not hired by conscious capitalism. I just think that what I've read, what I've found so far, that is the most exciting thing that I've been involved with. And that's why I keep talking about it right now. That's going to evolve too, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Will. Well, Elizabeth, it's going amazing. Our conversation is going so awesome. And since we don't have a lot of time, I would like to ask you that, do you have any sort of advice or suggestion for our dear listeners?
My learning that I would share is to explore mindfulness, explore it in a way that you can feel that it's comfortable for you, because there are so many ways to do that right now. So just Google it and hit a few play buttons to just see what voices resonate with you. That would be number one. And number two, use your voice when you can. If you are an owner or a leader or, even a friend or a colleague, use your voice to speak up about how you want to be treated, because now is the time that we can be listened to, I believe. I think the ears are open more than they have been in the past.
Because your voice matters. Every voice matters.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Elizabeth. It's amazing to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for allowing me to have this conversation with you and to get to know you a little bit. I love your practices. Thank you, Nisha.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this podcast episode today. I hope you learned from this episode that you can apply in your life. If you did enjoy this, please subscribe to the podcast, The Nishant Garg Show, on Apple Podcast. You can also subscribe to the show through my website, https://nishantgarg.me, NISHANTGARG.me. You can also share this podcast with your family and friends or whoever want to feel fulfilled. And thank you so much again.